We can go ahead and kick things off. Thank you, everybody, so much for being here. Um, Thanks for taking an hour out of your day to tune into this session. I'm thrilled to see over 450 people register and want to learn more about how you can make your job a climate job. My name is Natalie Labrie, and I'm the marketing lead here at Climate People. Climate People is a technology recruiting agency that's dedicated to decarbonizing the economy through placing mission-driven talent into climate tech careers. Our mission is simple. We are trying to get as many people working on climate solutions as humanly possible. So thank you for doing your part today and helping us act on that mission. At Climate People, we always say that getting a climate job is one of the most tangible climate actions that an individual can take. That's 40 plus hours a week that you're funneling into concrete climate actions. However, we also see that there's a significant disconnect between available roles and then job seekers that are on the market. There tends to be more of a straightforward path for those in hard engineering, scientific, and software professionals. And then in contrast, it can be slightly more difficult for those in non-technical fields to transition their careers to climate. So in response, that's why we're all here today. We're hosting this webinar to provide resources and guidance for both job seekers who are currently employed and looking to transition into a climate role, but they are not quite there yet. So they want to make that impact through their current profession. And then also for those who are happily employed and not looking to transition their careers to climate fully, but also still want to make that impact. So hopefully this will provide all of you with some of those resources. First, before we kick things off and I introduce you to our incredible panelists, I want to run this little poll just to get a gauge of who is in our audience today. Awesome. So 67% of you all are currently looking for a climate job, whereas 33% of you are not. So that's good to know. And our panelists will think of that as they craft some of the answers to our questions. So with that, I'm honored to introduce you to our panel of experts who will lay the groundwork for making your job a climate job. Up first, we have Ayana Bodhi, who is a senior associate at Drawdown Labs. Next, we have Adam Braun, who is the co-founder and the CEO of Climate Club, followed by Ben Lai, a senior software developer and lead of the employee green team at LinkedIn. And last, but certainly not least, we have Christy Drutman, who is a co-founder of Brown Girl Green. Climate People's founder, Brendan Anderson, is also here to answer some questions and provide a little bit more insights. So yeah, with that, we can go ahead and get started. One reminder to our audience is to please ask all of your questions in the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. We'll reserve 10 or 15 minutes or so at the end to answer some of those questions. So yeah, again, I'm so excited to have all of you here. And yeah, I'm gonna give you all a second to introduce yourselves because you can probably provide a little bit more context than just your name and your title as I did. So Christy, if you wouldn't mind kicking it off, would you mind just giving us a brief little introduction on yourself and the company that you work for?
Yeah, hi everyone. I'm so happy to be here. I'm Christy Drutman, and I am the founder of Brown Girl Green, as well as the co-founder of the Green Jobs Board, which is the relevance of today's conversation of my many hats. And Green Jobs Board is a platform that utilizes social media and community to bridge the equity gap between job seekers and folks trying to, get involved in the green economy. Really passionate about increasing diversity and inclusion, especially in the climate space, to bring more minorities and women into this field to get involved. So I'm so happy to be here.
Awesome, thank you. Who else can kick it off next?
Sure, I can kick it off. Yeah, hey everyone. My name is Ben Lai. I'm a front-end software developer at LinkedIn, and I'm also one of the leads for LinkedIn's green team, which is called Go Green. Specifically, I'm the marketing lead for our Bay Area chapter, which is our largest chapter, because LinkedIn's headquarters is here.
Awesome, thanks, Ben.
I could jump in next. Hi, everyone. My name is Adam Braun. I'm the co-founder and CEO at Climate Club. I've been an entrepreneur most of my career. I did start out originally in management consulting for a couple of years, but spent a number of years building and scaling in the education space, both the organization Pencils of Promise and then Mission U after that. And with little kids at home and looking at their timelines more than my own, became incredibly motivated to work on climate next. And in trying to figure out what I could build with others that would really make a dent, ended up becoming now co-founder and CEO at Climate Club. And we work with enterprise companies to really take sustainability out of a silo. So it's not just the kind of job of a few people in a department, and really help to embed sustainability across functions, teams, and individual roles in service of driving towards those high-level sustainability goals that are being set company-wide.
Awesome.
Cool. Hi, everybody. My name is Ayana Bodhi. Super excited to be here with y'all today. I'm a senior associate at Project Drawdown. Our mission is to help the world achieve drawdown, which is this future moment in time when greenhouse gases stop climbing and start to steadily decline. And our goal as an organization is to do that as quickly, safely, and equitably as possible. And within that, I work for a program called Drawdown Labs, which is kind of our private sector testing ground for accelerating the deployment of climate solutions within business, as well as investors and philanthropies. And I'm mostly focused on employee engagement and really helping employees kind of make those climate connections with their roles.
Awesome. Well, it's great to have all of you here with us today. So thank you for that quick little introduction. Adding on to that, could you quickly, in less than 1 minute, touch on your climate journey and how you got to where you are today, in hopes of giving our audience some inspiration on journeys that they can follow alongside? And we can just popcorn. Whoever wants to kick it off can go, and then we can follow and suit from there.
I can kick it off. Mine's pretty short and sweet. I don't have like this aha moment that I feel like a lot of people do and have really great stories of like their climate realization. I've just kind of always been interested in the environment more broadly, and thought I wanted to be an ecologist and went to school for science. And then I quickly realized field work and lab work are not really suited for me. And so then I went to grad school for environmental policy. I really wanted to like help pull like big levers when it came to climate action, and realized policy wasn't quite for me. And so that's how I kind of ended up working with businesses and employees on climate action.
Oh, good. Christy, you good.
Okay. Yeah, so a lot of my journey, I studied, city planning and environmental policy at university at UC Berkeley. I came from a very big, climate activist background. So I come from very deep in the environmental field, but then realized that, there's so many gaps in this industry to get people involved. I've worked with climate scientists from around the world who were like, we just don't know how to communicate about these issues or how to get people involved. And I was like, well, people aren't going to care if they have to worry about paying their bills and feeding their families. So you have to figure out how to make that translatable, how to make your organizations, more equitable, more inclusive, because the issue I keep hearing from environmental organizations and companies is we'll try to recruit diverse talent, but we don't know how to retain them. We don't know how to keep people interested or invested, and maybe you're not getting paid as well as maybe a job in the tech field at first, and obviously that's shifting, but for, a lot of the trends, it hasn't been the most attractive thing to want to transition into. So it's about storytelling, in my view. It's about palatability. And, the beginnings of me doing that was with my platform, Brown Girl Green, as a media platform. I am a climate communications expert and content creator on the internet, and I use those tools to also think about the green economy and, job employment. How is there storytelling gaps to bring more people into that conversation as well? And so the Green Jobs Board, we created community and an online space to have those conversations, to make skill building and, the climate space, more demystified, because it feels like it's just the greenies, it's just the hippies. And it's no, it's everyone for the survival of the planet and our communities. How do we tell that story better? And so that's been my journey in this space.
So I can go next. I'll be brief, but my my grandmothers in particular were a very big influence on me. One of them was kind of the reason that I went into the education space initially. But my other grandmother actually started the first recycling center in the state of New York, and eventually wrote a book before she passed away called Grandma Goes Green. And so she was like truly one of the OGs of the early environmental movement before it probably had all the naming conventions that are applied to it today. And so, growing up around somebody like that was incredibly influential. And so this has kind of always been the other big area of passion. But as I alluded to before, for me, the big kind of pivot point, trying to always build a career oriented towards how I could be of greatest service and trying to make the biggest positive impact that I could, was having kids. And I think we see this actually a lot with folks today, where maybe it wasn't their central issue, but when they look at timelines through their nieces, their nephews, their kids, their grandkids, et cetera, you realize that the choices that we make today are the realities that they will live their way into. And so in becoming a dad years ago, I realized that's the single most important job I'll ever undertake. And to be the best, person that I can be for future generations, whether that's my kids or anybody else's, was the real call to action to say, okay, what can I do? And then, like most folks on this webinar are doing, I spent about 2 years just trying to kind of live in the flow of information, joining dozens and dozens of similar sessions to this one, putting myself in probably north of a dozen Slack communities where I could meet great people. And then through that learning journey, trying to find the alignment between my head and my heart, which culminated in my case in Climate Club, but I think it's unique for each person.
That's awesome. Ben.
All righty, I'll go. I've been an environmentalist ever since I was a kid. I don't have the background, the educational background that you guys have. Some of you have. I studied technology. I studied computer science and biology and so forth. But I've always sort of been passionate about the environment. And basically, since An Inconvenient Truth came out, I've been passionate about climate change. I knew that it was a danger to our species. I joined LinkedIn a long time ago, 10 and a half years ago, but I think it's about 6 years ago when I heard that LinkedIn planned to start a green team. I was like, yeah, that's, finally, I can find people that are, passionate about it like I am. So I joined, the very first meeting, and I've been a leader ever since. So that's my journey.
That's awesome. Those are some great stories, and I'm sure our audience is getting some inspiration from all of that. So thank you for sharing. But just to start, very, very, very generic and on the top of the funnel, what does it mean to make your job a climate job? And why is that important? Again, we can popcorn style for the rest of the webinar too. So if anyone wants to hop in, go for it.
I can start.
All right, I'll put it. Oh yeah, go ahead.
Three at the same time.
So I would say, how to make any job a climate job really comes down to transferable skills and what skills are in the highest demand right now, at least from my perspective. There's such a huge need for people who have, data analysis, backgrounds, research backgrounds, people who are even really good with, honestly, data. I just keep thinking about data. The climate movement in space needs so much data and, more platforms and data tracking to understand the impact of things like carbon sequestration. There's so many amazing projects, and I'm sure Ayana can talk about this as well. There's so many amazing projects around the world that are trying to tackle the climate crisis, but to be able to actually measure the impact in communities and on things like carbon sequestration, there's not the best tracking systems for that. There's not the best data analysis available for that. So I think, I know this audience, there's a lot of people in the crowd that do have that background, in statistical analysis, in tech, learning how to design things like apps and platforms and programs to do better tracking. And I think all of those skills that you had in your previous jobs can be easily transferable to the climate space, because there needs to be, you know, better numbers and measurement, because again, those of us who do the storytelling, like myself, who do the media and the marketing and the storytelling, we need that data. We rely so heavily on that data to influence policymakers, to be able to, you know, push the needle on a lot of these issues. So I think the more refined data that could happen, the better. And so I think there's that. I would say also, like, you know, with the emergence of the Inflation Reduction Act, there's going to be so many jobs to build, you know, renewable energy infrastructure, and to address things like energy efficiency and addressing the lead pipe issues all over the country. Little things like that are going to result in so many jobs being created that don't even require people to have a college degree. And I think it's going to open up the floodgates for more people to realize that you can have a trade background. You don't have to have a PhD anymore to be in the climate world. And so I just want to start off with that like, I think the barriers to entry can be lowered, as well as having those transferable skill sets. It's just a matter of how do we build those roadmaps for people.
Yeah, for sure. Definitely think the innovation is spiking this year. And then the barriers of entry, you don't have to have that environmental background. And I think that is a huge misconception that a lot of people have. Does anyone else have anything to add to that, to either what Christy said or to the initial question too?
Yeah, I wanted to add on to what Christy just said. So LinkedIn has a team called the Economic Graph Team, and we do a lot of analysis on, you know, the trends, like economic trends. And we have found that, you know, people like green jobs are actually growing really fast. They're on pace to be like there are going to be more new green jobs than, you know, jobs in the fossil fuel economy very, very soon. I think it's like this year or next year or something. And also, the other thing we found, a significant finding that we've made, is that green jobs are growing really fast, but the skills that match those are not growing, you know, fast enough. And they're not like just, you know, oh, you know, measuring carbon, or, oh, you know, like you know, understanding some science a part of this. It's like, you know, all kinds of jobs are being affected. Like one industry, for example, is the fashion industry. There, you know, it's people are starting to have to, well, not have to, sustainability is becoming, you know, an advantage in those kind of jobs, you know, like circular economy, circular manufacturing kind of things. And a lot of people don't realize, like, oh, you know, no matter what part of the economy you're in, you know, I mean, sooner or later, it's going to be, it's going to have something to do with the climate. Because almost every part of the economy uses energy or material. Right. So if you're a truck driver, you know, if you manage a fleet of trucks or whatever, any of those things. So, yeah, I just wanted to tack on that, you know, we think that, you know, even though you may, like, individuals out there might not think that they're going to be working on that, they will be, you know, soon in the future.
Definitely. Yeah, we always say that climate is a transition of the entire global economy. It's not working on solar panels like in the back of your screen there, Ben. It can be that, but then it also is those people who are making the newest the newest shirts and the newest textiles and all of that. There's a role to play in all of those sectors. So I definitely agree with that. Ayan or Adam, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, I'll just first of all plus to everything that's been said so far, and also add that. So I mean, I work mostly with like corporate employees, and so I feel like when we say like making your job a climate job, I really think that it's kind of about one, like supporting employees and like pushing their companies to be better on climate action and like really like raise the bar for corporate sustainability. And in order to do that, like companies need more skills and like more people to help them reach these, you know, lofty climate targets that they have, and even go beyond that. And so, you know, we have like a lot of people who like want to provide value. They are looking for, I think more people are looking for more meaning in their roles as well. And so, you know, we just have all these people out there with like such broad skill sets and knowledge that, like Christy mentioned, like need to be used like for the climate movement. Like we need all of those skills. And so I think from like the Drawdown Labs perspective, like making your job a climate job is really about like realizing that like you as an employee can contribute, and you don't have to be like in a climate nonprofit or like be a scientist to be able to do that. And like you can make those connections between like your role, even if it's like you think it's totally unrelated. I promise you it's not totally unrelated. It's actually very related. And like using that to like really help the private sector just like be way better on the climate crisis.
Yeah, I would add in 2 additional just thoughts or ideas for folks that might be, participating today or listening in to kind of figure out how to make that transition. So the first one would be, I like this phrase a lot, but like asking for permission is asking for denial. And so I think that if you look at statistically, it's something like 80+% of chief sustainability officers today came from within their company. And in the process of doing so, they didn't necessarily have this kind of deep background, let's say in environmental studies or sciences. They were just somebody who kind of raised the hand, or in some cases was delegated to them. But their focus really became on becoming one of those internal sustainability or climate champions, and then driving success across the business as the kind of functional leader around this new and emerging space. And so one consideration would be that you don't necessarily have to leave your company and look for a new job, but you can, kind of be proactive and not wait for somebody to ask you to do this. But if you really just kind of put the one foot in front of another and say, hey, I've gone out and done some great work, and here's some of my ideas. A lot of times you see that those are kind of the folks that end up driving a lot of the internal innovation and eventually kind of crafting their own position. And there's many, many folks that I can reference, that companies like Pinterest or Microsoft or many others that I've gotten to meet in the last couple of years that have kind of forged that path. And the second perspective, similar to what Ayana was touching on, is that I think whether you want it to be part of your job or not, it's coming. And, in speaking to hundreds of heads of sustainability at big companies, what's really clear is that for these companies to be successful in the kind of transitionary economy that we're going to see going forward, there's a perspective that says, hey, any person that's making purchases on behalf of our company needs to take sustainability into consideration. Any person that's driving product iteration or design or engineering, they need to incorporate elements of sustainability. If you're crafting new marketing campaigns, if you're implementing HR policies. And so, this is a lot of the work that I know Drawdown Labs has done, is a lot of the work that we do at Climate Club with our platform and the product that we built. But I think whether you want to be proactive or reactive, it is coming into most roles. And it's really a kind of decision around how you want to participate in that kind of new economy coming forward.
Definitely. Yeah, I think you all brought up a lot of incredible points, but Adam, what you were saying about being that person at your organization, do you have any advice for being that person? And Ben, I feel like this person might actually be you at LinkedIn. So maybe if you both could touch on like tips and tidbits for standing up for that, and like how to make that voice be heard at the company. And then Ben, if you want to add in how you did it, that would probably be great for the audience.
I'll let Adam go first.
Okay. Well,
Or I
I'll try
can
to
go first.
No, why don't you go ahead? I'm happy to chime in afterwards. I think
Okay. Yeah, sure.
But-
Sure. Yeah, I mean, I kind of think for me, it's sort of like, I don't need to know everything about, climate change or climate science in order to like start, taking action. Just because I just know that like so many other people just don't know enough, right? Like, and it's just, for me, it's like, it's an important enough issue that I'm just going to jump in without knowing everything. And I'm not going to even try to pretend to be like I'm the expert or whatever, but I'm happy to just go out and find the experts, find the books and so forth. Like at LinkedIn, one of the things that we do, we bring in speakers, we bring in specialists of all kinds, but we also have a movie club, we also have a book club. And for me, I think I speak on behalf of like all the Go Green leads at LinkedIn. We are all educating each other, right? We're all here to learn, how to like learn this and share resources. We have like we're part of Microsoft, so we use Teams a lot, but some of us also use Slack. But like, we share a lot of resources that way. We share through emails and so forth, and through social events and stuff. And I think the social part of that is a big part of it, because like, after all, we're all human beings. Like we crave to to share expertise. We want to be validated. We want to know that we're going the right direction, right? And having a bunch of people kind of be talking just helps with that whole process. Adam?
Sure. I think the experience that you have in your current role, if you're kind of thinking about how to make your own job today a more sustainable job, is one that, whether you realize it or not, is directly contributing to your company's emissions and likely wastewater, potentially, impact on biodiversity, land degradation, et cetera. And I think maybe the perspective that I would share, and then, for each person, feel free to try and kind of figure out how to best act on this, is that I think looking at the maturity of your company and where your company's at in its sustainability journey is really important. And so what we've kind of identified is that there are really mature companies that have been doing, let's say, carbon accounting or kind of inventory of their emissions for many, many years. And they've set very aggressive goals on reduction. They're now at a stage where they're trying to drive that reduction forward, or kind of increase in efficiency, all these things. There are others that are just at the very start of that journey, and they're today just trying to get a handle on what their scope 1 and 2 might look like, and aren't even ready to tackle scope 3. And then there's this entire kind of middle ground. But as soon as a company starts that process, in order to gather the information to do the inventory, it's incredibly cross-functional work. And so you can contribute in that way by enabling your company to get better on its data. That's the potential starting place. I would say a lot of companies today have kind of completed that process, or at least are pretty advanced in that process. And so then the question becomes, with very, very limited headcount, if you're a 10,000 person organization, you might have 4 people full-time that are dedicated to sustainability. For you to actually achieve the targets that you've set, that means that you need each person to be incorporating elements of their job into more sustainable behavior. And if you're one of those 4 people, chances are you don't actually understand what goes into the 100+, let's say, unique jobs across your company. It might be a lot more. The person who's going to understand that best is you, the viewer of this webinar, who is actually in the seat and not only understands what you can do to contribute to sustainability, but ideally you can actually chart a path that others can emulate. And then best case scenarios, it gets upstreamed, and then it just becomes policy across your department or potentially across the company. And so again, kind of touching on what I was referencing earlier about asking for permission is asking for denial, you're effectively supporting the work of your sustainability leadership team by trying to figure out how to bring greater data, greater action, greater visibility, and storytelling. I think, this is some of the great work that Christy does, is telling the stories that others are then inspired by. And I just wouldn't underestimate the size of the influence that you can have on your peer set. And then if your story is told more widely, that can become, the standard across your department, your company, or maybe even your entire industry.
I just want to add a little bit to that. Sorry.
No, yeah, of course.
And I, just from my purview, the way I see what Adam was just talking about is sort of like there's 3 levels of like, how deeply you work on sustainability in your company, right? Like you could be on the sustainability team itself, which is like a tiny group, right? But you could also be in the employee group that cares about sustainability, which, I mean, we like Go Green works really closely with our sustainability team at LinkedIn, which is like only 5 people or something. But there's like, I don't know, several dozen, Go Green leads throughout the world. And on top of that, we have a mailing list of thousands of people, right, that that we talk to about sustainability. So it's sort of like you've got this big network, and you need all of those layers in order to, push forward certain goals, right? And they all serve a different function, and they all need to be working together.
Definitely. Thank you. All brought up some really good points there. Ayana, a question for you specifically. Could you walk us through the framework that Drawdown Labs has implemented? Is it more employee focused or employer focused? And can you just provide some more context to add a little bit more to what Ben and Adam were saying?
Yeah, happy to kind of overview that framework real quick. So the framework we're talking about is called the Drawdown Aligned Business Framework. We came out with this in September of 2021 in this report called Climate Solutions at Work, which is really about two things. It's one about kind of elevating like the standard for corporate sustainability, which I mentioned earlier, and then also like democratizing climate action. So kind of what we're talking about today, like how do we make climate action more cross-functional and not just the purview of sustainability teams? And so the framework really outlines kind of like 8 key leverage points that businesses have, not just to do like less harm, but to like hopefully like really make a climate impact in the broader world using their financial power, their political power, and their social power to really like help the world achieve drawdown. And that's really about like going beyond just net zero and like thinking beyond just reducing operational emissions, but like really thinking about all these other things that businesses can impact, like climate policy advocacy and engaging their employees and their stakeholders and rethinking financial relationships. And ultimately, I think the framework is kind of like asking businesses to rethink their business models and how can their business models be in service of like a climate safe and just future. And so in order to do that, we need way more people working on climate action. And so, businesses need to like really expand climate action beyond traditional sustainability teams. And just to like give some examples, like, okay, if a company needs to be better with climate policy advocacy, they need to work with their government relations and public policy teams. Maybe companies need to rethink their travel policies. Well, that involves human resources and operations. Legal teams can help rewrite contracts and like thinking about how they favor sustainable and more diverse suppliers. So businesses have a lot of leverage, and they also have a lot of employees that can help like activate this leverage. And so that's really what the framework is. So it is very employee focused, but like really it's helpful for people who are in workplaces or in organizations or institutions. It kind of just like helps connect the dots between like your role and leverage that your business has to really make a broader impact on climate. And so, yeah, that's what the framework is.
Yeah, yep, that makes a lot of sense. You can definitely see how it is the role of the employer to set the stone for those policies, but then the employee's voice needs to be heard in order for those to be enacted. So definitely not think that makes a lot of sense. Christy, do you have anything to add to the whole storytelling element that we were touching on earlier and the role that those employees' voices and sharing those stories really play into the greater arena?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's interesting, like, over the years, like, my friends who, like, they don't come from an environmental background, but they might follow me on social media. Like, they'll tell me, like, I saw these different posts, and, like, now I've, like, encouraged, my team to think about, like, their sustainability, even, like, in their office space or, doing community events. And I can even say from, like, the companies that like I've partnered with and worked with from more like a media like content creator standpoint, like I've seen like brands, like I'm a part of this incubator with the brand Toms of Maine, and they're a company that is inherently sustainable, but like they're thinking about giving out grant funding to on the ground activists to do climate work. And it's interesting because like I've worked with Salesforce, and Salesforce is not necessarily a quote unquote climate company, but became a very focused on climate company in the past couple years, putting a lot of like funding and resources specifically to go towards climate activism, and that's been through like really tangible programming and resources. And so I think climate stuff isn't just a compost bin in your office. It can also be like straight up money that you're giving to organizations that are doing the work instead of you as a company or an institution having to reinvent the wheel. Like thinking about your social impact campaigns, whether that's volunteering or straight up resource redistribution, I think that's the way that companies need to be thinking about their ESG goals. That goes beyond just, reducing emissions. It's actually, thinking about your longer term social impact as an organization. And employees have the power to bring these concerns up. And especially, I know that like some companies allocate professional development funds. You could use your professional development funds to get things like ESG certification, LEED certification, things like that, that maybe are just of your interest. And then you can bring that to your team, bring that to your company and be like, look, I got this certification. I have this new knowledge set. Maybe we can rethink our programming, the ways in which we're communicating these things. So that way we're not just like, oh yeah, we care about emissions, but it's complicated because of XYZ bureaucratic thing. Like actually implement it, and then that makes you not only look like more legit and not greenwashy, it like makes you look like you're actually doing things out in the world, and like communities and people around you can see and benefit from that impact.
Yeah, for sure. That's a great point. And I love the compost bin. Maybe the compost bin filled with money might be the way to go. So if we were to all put ourselves in our audience's shoes right now and say they all work for a company that isn't being as proactive as maybe Salesforce was, or any of the other companies that we mentioned, and you were to give them a 3-step process for making their job a climate job, what would those 3 steps entail? It could be 1 step to kick it off too. It doesn't have to be the laid out plan. Adam, you got it.
I mean, off the top of my head, without thinking through the question in advance, my advice would be, first would be to do your research and see if your company's put out a sustainability report that outlines their goals. Before I speak to a lot of sustainability leaders, I just do the research, and coming into the conversation, it's very clear if somebody's done their homework or not, and taken that kind of limited amount of time, and you come off, in a much better position if you're able to say, hey, I saw that we outlined these 7 goals and that we're targeting these goals by 2030. I want to talk about accelerating those timelines, versus, hey, I just want to learn. Because then you're creating work for somebody who's likely already kind of, pretty overwhelmed with work. So the first step I would say is do your research, do your homework, have internal conversations with the relevant folks who can help you get smart on what your company strategy looks like today. I think the second step would be try and build relationships with the folks that are key stakeholders in that sustainability strategy. And I think Ben, kind of touched on this very appropriately. You're probably going to have very few folks that are full-time on sustainability, but if your company has an employee resource group, however they name it, what I'm seeing pretty clearly is the sustainability focused resource group or employee resource or community of practice within most companies is either the largest or one of the largest or the fastest growing ERG within many large companies. And so there's momentum there. And when there's momentum, people at the top have to pay attention. And so that would be the second part is build the relationships with the key people, having first laid the foundation and done your homework. And then the third step is try and be really proactive and be thoughtful and come with your own hypothesis, your own strategy, and, use some of the great resources that are out here. They've been posted into some of the Slack communities. I know that probably each of our respective organizations, whether it's some of Christy's content or, Drawdown Labs is fantastic content, or LinkedIn Learning, or the content that we put out through Climate Club, you can get smart on kind of what works and perhaps what doesn't. And then I would come in with an informed hypothesis and say, here's how I want to convert my role and, help accelerate the shared goals that we have. And then, try and build a movement around that.
Yeah, definitely. Those are great points. Ben?
Hey, yeah, the other thing I want to add is this is something I always bring up or bring up pretty often at our Go Green meetings is I think knowledge and information are important, but it's so important that, I mean, I know I do this kind of work from my heart, right? Like we're all passionate. I'm sure everybody here like watching this is probably pretty passionate. Otherwise, you wouldn't, tune in. But yeah, the thing is, we've got a lot of people, like out in the world, out in our organizations who are not as passionate as we are. And I think the challenge is how to speak to their hearts, right? Like you got to speak to somebody's heart before you before you can reach their mind. And so you got to understand, like, like what Adam was talking about, like building these relationships. Does somebody like to go camping or hiking or hunting or fishing or whatever? Do they go scuba diving? Like try to talk to them about like, hey, what is it that you enjoy? And then start kind of relating that to, like, hey, or especially like Adam, you talked about children, right? Especially like, hey, there's, you've got another generation coming, how are you helping to make the world better for them, right? And as I know both Ayana and Christy were talking about the representation, like how do we make the world a fairer place as well, and as well as a greener place. So, and I think just talking to them from your point of view is not necessarily going to win over their hearts. You got to like understand, this is the product manager in me, like trying to think about, how to win over somebody, how to persuade somebody, right? Like talk about how, what they care about and how to win them over that way.
Yeah, definitely. If you're gonna try to convince someone, you have to meet them where they are. If you're not meeting them where they are, or things that values a value to them, it's gonna go right over their head. So I think that's a great point.
Yeah, one other thing just that I think is important for people that are genuinely going to do this to keep in mind is that, especially in the current environment, the more that you can tie the benefit of being or advancing sustainability within your role to what I would think of as business outcomes for the company, the more likely you are to drive success. And so if you're saying, hey, we should, be more sustainable and I need extra budget, it's just not going to land very well. But if you can really come in and build the case to say, actually, look at a bunch of peers, they've taken these steps and there's been a lot of accretive business benefit. And that being not just like, hey, here's these kind of high level stats that say that people want to work at more sustainable companies, because I think people are familiar with those. But like in my job with the specific activities that I'm supposed to undertake, if I make some more sustainable decisions over the next 24 months, here's the financial benefit that the company will reap as a result. Like that is actually what's gonna, from what I've seen, drive more success than, hey, just give me extra budget that you probably aren't, going to be particularly successful in securing right now.
Again, meeting the people where they are, and if that's where the business leaders are, then that's gonna, yeah, great point, great point. Ayana or Christy, do you have anything to add for your 3-step suggestions, or do you just want to echo what has already been said and we can move on to the next question?
I would just add really quickly, well, definitely, yeah, I was going to also mention like making the business case. I think, unfortunately, that is something that resonates with people, even though we wish it wasn't the thing that resonates with people the most. But I was also going to say, I think understanding the type of culture you have at your workplace is really important. We've worked with companies that are really open and like, they're like, yeah, that sounds great. Like, go for it. Like, if you care about this, that's awesome. I've seen people like create sustainability roles for themselves after just taking upon themselves, like starting from a green group and like then moving into a more formal sustainability role. But we've also worked with companies that aren't that way and are a little bit more conservative and much more strict in terms of like their work and their roles and responsibilities. And so I would definitely encourage folks to power map. It sounds scary, but it's really just like thinking critically and strategically about like who in your company is on board with climate and sustainability and also has a level of decision-making power that can like help you transform your role and like your responsibilities. So yeah, just want to plug power mapping.
Maybe we could include a resource for how to power map later, right?
I was just going to add one last thing that, like, the key is to find the alignment between like your skills, your passion, and what will pay you. And, it's one of those things where it does, similar to power mapping, you have to start understanding what the ecosystem is and how you can plug in. And again, like, if you've never been in like the environmental or climate space, it is kind of like speaking a new language. There's so many acronyms. There's so many like weird things that like you don't know how to interpret right away. So it's like you have to kind of like do all this like self-studying, and it can feel really intimidating. But I would just say like I think something that's useful is figuring out keywords related to your current resume, and maybe some keywords of like positions or certifications you're interested in. I know like I just put a link to some certifications, and within a lot of those certification courses, they'll mention like some professions or like examples of like work that currently exists. And it's important to kind of just like study. It might be like some LinkedIn stalking you have to do a little bit to like find some of your key people that have the skill set you're looking for, trying to connect with them, building those relationships. I believe anything that you don't know, there's definitely people in the room that do. And so I think there's a lot of opportunity to be curious and to ask those questions. On the opposite end of things, of course, you have to meet people where they're at, but they also have to be curious and willing to want to do that as well. And so I'd say if you're one of those people that may feel stressed out or overwhelmed even starting with that process, I just want to say there's a lot of people out there that want to like help you out. So even if that is making like a post on LinkedIn and saying like, hey, this is my skill set. I want to get into climate. Does anyone have suggestions for me? There will be people like, at least, if you connect with any of us here on LinkedIn afterwards, I'm sure those of us can get you on like that first step to thinking about people you can connect with, conversations you can have. And that's a real tangible way that you can start like building community and networking, because it can feel really isolating and be like, okay, I have to build this skill set now, send my resume out into the wind, and we don't even know if they're going to accept me because I don't even have a climate or environmental background. And so it's like, how do we break down those barriers as well? There has to be community, there has to be collaboration with people, a little bit of hand holding in that way, because if we want people to come in, we also have to create those pathways, because it doesn't really exist that well yet. So just wanted to include that as well.
Yeah, definitely. And at Climate People, we are usually working with people who are looking to transition full-time to climate, and networking is our number one piece of advice. But I think you're totally right. Networking doesn't have to be when you're looking to get a new job. Networking serves to build your community and enhance your skills, even if you're just trying to optimize where you currently are. So I think that is an awesome point. Very, very quickly, 20 seconds each. I want to make sure we have enough time for Q&A, but I would love for all of you to give one final takeaway to the people in attendance today for making your job a climate job. We also can move straight to the Q&A too. We can't think of anything right now. To the Q&A, we can go back to it. Unless, Adam, do you have it?
I think there's like two different approaches. There's one that's transition into a new job, in which case I think resources like Christy's company and some of the others that are out there, or even working with Climate People, is a fantastic opportunity. And then I think there's the staying within your own job. And then I would encourage folks to check out Drawdown Labs and Climate Club. And as a starting place, kind of like today, see if you have an ERG. And if you don't have an employee resource group focused on sustainability, be the one to start it. And then you become the closest touch point to the sustainability team. And if there is one in place, then start building your community internally through there, and hopefully adopt some of the practices that you've heard today.
Definitely. I think that's great advice. Awesome. So let's go ahead and move into the Q&A. Our first question that we have is, what should the approach for those who don't have tech backgrounds and in more organizational roles, for example, sales, marketing, research, etc.? Is there a difference for people in those more soft roles, or is it pretty similar to the hard tech roles for making your job a climate job?
Take a stab at this one. First, I would definitely encourage you to check out Drawdown Labs' job function action guides. This is like exactly what we're trying to tackle, where we like look at really common corporate professions, including things like sales and marketing, kind of like those less like techie engineering roles, and like coming up with very specific actions that people in these roles can take to make those connections with climate. So definitely encourage you to check those out. And this is a silly like piece of advice, but I would even just Google like your industry plus climate. Like there is probably a group that is already working on this, like sales plus climate, marketing. I know there's a lot in marketing and climate. So I would definitely just like do a quick Google search. I think there are a lot of groups out there that are asking these exact same questions that you could plug into. And I think this was already mentioned before, but definitely just reach out to climate organizations, like literally any of us, to like, I think people are always pretty open to like just talking to people and brainstorming with people. I think there's like something called like, I'm gonna get it wrong, like climate open door policy, where people are like agreeing to like have their doors open for like networking conversations with people interested looking to get into climate. So
For sure. And Brendan, I saw you in the Q&A. You wanted to provide an answer to that one too, so feel free to hop in.
I was actually just looking to put the Drawdown Labs job function action guide into the chat. That's all I was doing.
Oh, perfect. Perfect. Does anyone else have anything they want to add to Ayana, or should we move to the next question? Perfect. So the next one is on entry-level jobs. It's easier for people who have more established careers to make that impact and have that voice. What advice do you have for people who are a little bit newer and don't necessarily know how to ask those questions or stand up for themselves in that regard?
Yeah, I would love to answer that question. I would say like for people who are like starting out, I mean, again, like I just hear this from organizations all the time that a lot of companies and organizations are just concerned about like retaining good talent, and especially for like younger people, especially Gen Z, like a lot of people will not put up with like a toxic workspace or like being, not getting like the benefits they want or to like see the impact they want to make. They will say something about it. A lot of people, at least from what like I witnessed, but I would say like we're not necessarily the more like outspoken type to bring those things up. I think something that's valuable is to be like observant and to like have those like one-on-one conversations. I think it can be really stressful to be in like an all hands meeting or like even in like bigger conversations to bring up things around maybe sustainability or like the ways that you want things to shift. But it's valuable, like we were saying, like doing power mapping and becoming observational, and kind of just understanding like how does this ecosystem work and getting your like feet in and trying to understand that and learn like who are some of those key players you could be having those one-on-one conversations with who can pull those levers and like make those decisions and like make those shifts. So that's what I would suggest as like a step for people who might not feel like they're in that position necessarily. And if you're currently maybe fresh out of college and like you don't have that experience, like we were saying, like a lot of these companies or organizations are looking for entry level people that might not necessarily have a climate background but have an interest or a passion in it, but have those transferable skills like from your degree. So I would say like there's even a better opportunity if you are entry level because you don't have like, I don't know, this backlog of a resume in some ways where you're like so worried about that. It's like, no, like you're building skills and like I'm sure an organization's going to take you on and you'll learn more about it. So just like get that out of your head that like, oh my gosh, I'm new, I'm fresh, and like I don't have the experience. It's like there's people that are going to want to take you on to like build up that capacity to retain you to build up their organization. So yeah.
For sure. That's a great point.
Can I
Okay, the
add
next-
to this, Chrissy?
Oh
Sorry.
yeah, please do.
Yeah,
Please do.
I was gonna say like, this is my experience, like, sometimes with sustainability, nobody's the expert. And, just being the first one, just, if you're motivated, then just go for it, and if you like, you might just become the sustainability expert at your company or whatever, the informal de facto one. And then eventually that within your company or in the next company, you could turn that into something, more meaty, right? Like full time.
For sure. Yeah, I think that's a good point. Awesome. Our next question is, do you have any tips or advice on how to build sustainability programs for remote companies? What do you think green remote companies will look like? Is it any different?
Yeah,
Go for
I
it.
mean, so LinkedIn does, we have a lot of remote workers, right? And so there are Go Green chapters that are remote. I think it's a little hard, like actually just, this hybrid model is pretty hard nowadays. LinkedIn used to sort of think, oh, like measuring our, energy usage or water usage or, waste, what do you call it? How much waste we generate is, how we're going to tackle sustainability. Well, not if everybody works from home, So we're pretty serious about giving budget to, people who are remote and, just I think targeting education and, helping people become more like behave more sustainably at home, right? In what they eat, how they commute, how they drive, whatever, and what, maybe even in their, home energy, right? And I'm sure, like Climate Club, might have stuff to say about that.
Yeah, sure. So we run programs and work closely with a number of companies that have very large hybrid or work from home employee bases. And I think there's a number of things that we've developed, that we've rolled out with some of these companies. And if folks on this webinar are interested, my email is just 8@climateclub.com. My initials. I'm happy to follow up and connect and share. But I think there's this journey that oftentimes in many cases can start with education and, it could be training, upskilling, however you want to frame it. But it's really about helping people understand sustainability 101, sustainability through the lens of your company, and then sustainability through the lens of where you sit in that journey today. It could be your role, could be your geography, could be the way or the place in which you work, whether it's at an office or out of home. And then a couple of the things that we've done to help companies run effective programs for remote employees is really oriented around partnerships. And so one of the things that is increasingly becoming really relevant is that if your company is measuring emissions and then committing to net zero, and you have work from home individuals, their home energy utilization for the purposes of work contribute to your scope 3 calculations. And so companies really need to get quality data on that. I think we're maybe the only platform that I know of that can do that. And then from there, you need to give people the very specific playbooks and actions, and then the ability to track and have visibility into who's doing what. And then I think the unique thing that I really love that a number of us worked on is now building partnerships with, whether it's on home energy, the Home Connects or the Google Nests of the world, or on your commute, companies like Lyft, where we have a partnership, or even in your food consumption, if you're purchasing company-based meals with folks like Sweetgreen, and kind of building out these supplier-based partnerships that can help accelerate the transition towards more sustainable offerings for your people.
That's awesome. I think that makes a lot of sense. So unfortunately, we are all out of time. It's wild how fast an hour can go, and you have so much incredible insights floating around. But I wanted to extend a huge thank you to all of you who are in attendance and for all those questions. And then, of course, our incredible panelists, Ayana, Adam, Ben, and Christy. Thank you so much for all your insights. I have learned so much in the past hour, and I hope everyone here has as well. So yeah, I'm gonna send an email at the end of the day today that has a link to this webinar. And then I also plan on answering all those questions that we didn't get to, because they are really important. So we'll get you answers to those questions, and then also links to all of those resources that were mentioned. But thank you again, everyone. Happy Tuesday.